Mama, where are we going today? 4-year-old Amy asked her mother from the back seat of the car. Her little feet dangled above the floor, not quite reaching it. The scenery outside the window was unfamiliar. A special place, Amy, her mother Charlotte replied with a smile in the rearview mirror. There was something unnatural about that smile. We'll be there soon. Amy clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly as she gazed out the window. She had sensed the changing atmosphere at home recently. Since her mother had started living with Daniel, it seemed the kindness toward her had gradually disappeared. Charlotte Johnson had divorced her husband a year ago. Amy's father never reappeared. Shortly after the divorce, Charlotte met Daniel Lopez and welcomed him into their home. At first, Daniel was kind to Amy, but as time passed, he began treating her like an unwanted burden. "This child limits our freedom," Amy had overheard him saying to Charlotte several times. "It's difficult to start a new life with a child." The car stopped in front of a large station. Amid the busy flow of people, Charlotte got out of the car and opened the back door. "Come on, Amy. Let's get out." Amy held her mother's hand as they entered the station. It was her first time visiting such a place. The high ceiling of the grand station, the never-ending stream of people, the announcements, everything was new and a little frightening. Charlotte led her to a row of coin lockers. Amy could see Daniel watching them from a distance. A strange smile played on his face. "Amy, wait here for a little while." Charlotte placed a small key in Amy's hand. The key felt cold, with a strange presence in Amy's tiny palm. "This is your home now. You need to stay inside." Before Amy could say anything, Charlotte pushed her into the locker and closed the door. Confused by the sudden darkness, Amy could only see faint light coming through a small air vent in the narrow space. Her heart began to pound fiercely. "Mama. Let me out." Amy began to cry. She pounded on the door with her tiny hands, but it wouldn't open. "Mama. Where are you? Mama." From outside, she could hear Charlotte and Daniel's voices. Finally got rid of the nuisance, it was Charlotte's voice. "Now we can start a new life," Daniel replied. "No one will find her. This station is too crowded, nobody will notice one child crying. I feel a little guilty, but this is the best choice." Charlotte's voice gradually faded. "We can't afford to raise a child. Forget about it. A new town and a new life await us." Their footsteps grew fainter until they completely disappeared. Amy was left alone in the darkness. "Mama. Mama." Her voice eventually grew quieter and turned into sobs. The stuffed rabbit she clutched was her only comfort in this terror. Amy lost all sense of time. She didn't know how long it had lasted. She cried until exhausted, then began crying again. The cramped locker gradually became hot, and she started feeling suffocated. "Someone help me." Her voice had become almost inaudible. Just then, footsteps stopped outside the locker. "Is that a child crying?" came a man's voice. "Where is it coming from?" another male voice responded. Amy summoned her last bit of strength and cried out, "Help me." The locker door opened, and blinding light streamed in. Before Amy stood a kind-looking man. It was Thomas Green, wearing a station attendant's badge. "My God." Thomas wore an expression of shock as he gently lifted Amy out. "Are you all right, little lady?" Amy couldn't speak, just clung to Thomas while crying. Her body was damp with sweat and tears. Thomas's friend, photographer Robert Hudson, was also present. Witnessing this unusual scene, he took out his camera and began taking photos. Robert, out of professional habit, was trying to document this incident. "What are you going to do with her?" Robert asked. Thomas, while gently holding Amy, replied, "We have to contact the police. We need to find the parents who abandoned this child." As the camera shutter quietly clicked, Thomas asked Amy, "What's your name?" "Amy." She answered in a small voice. "Amy Johnson." It's going to be okay, Amy. No one will hurt you now, Thomas said gently. Amy, time to wake up. At the sound of a gentle female voice, Amy slowly opened her eyes. Looking up at the still unfamiliar ceiling, she was momentarily confused about where she was. But the sweet scent of pancakes wafting from beyond the door quickly brought her back to reality. Good morning, Maria. Mom. Amy still awkwardly pronounced the word mom. 3 months had passed since the adoption, but it was taking time for her to call Alan and Maria Walker dad and mom. Maria Walker smiled and sat on the edge of Amy's bed. She was a woman with warm brown eyes and a kind smile. The childless Walker couple had long wished to welcome Amy into their home. Breakfast is ready. Dad is already waiting. In the dining room, Alan was drinking coffee while reading a newspaper. He taught art history at a university and had a deep understanding of art and beauty. Good morning, Amy. Alan looked up from his newspaper and smiled as Amy entered the room. Did you sleep well? Amy nodded. She was still a child of few words. Even months after the locker incident, she sometimes woke up from nightmares. However, the stable daily life with the Walker family was gradually healing her emotional wounds. What would you like to do today? Maria asked as she placed pancakes in front of Amy. After thinking for a moment, Amy replied, I want to draw. Alan's face brightened. That's a good idea. The weather's nice, so how about drawing in the backyard? I'll work a bit beside you. After breakfast, Alan carried an easel and art supplies out to the garden. Amy sat on the grass with a small sketchbook and colored pencils. She began drawing the sky, clouds, and a big tree. And in her drawing, several keys were hidden. Alan peered at Amy's artwork and noticed her unique expressiveness. Maria, look at this, he called to his wife. There's something special about Amy's drawings. Her sense of color and form is extraordinary. Maria agreed. You're right. She has talent. From then on, the Walker couple devoted themselves to nurturing Amy's artistic talent. They took her to museums and exposed her to various arts. Alan particularly enjoyed showing Amy books about jewelry design. Look, Amy. These rings and necklaces aren't just decorations. They tell stories. Amy was especially fascinated by the shimmer of gold and silver. By the time she was 10, she began standing out in her school's art classes. On her 12th birthday, the Walker couple gave her a small jewelry making kit. It's for expressing your creativity, Maria said. Amy hugged them both with gratitude. Thank you, Mom, Dad. By this time, Amy had become a full-fledged member of the Walker family. She had made friends at school and regained her smile. However, memories of her past never completely faded. The ikigai motif consistently appeared in her work, becoming part of her identity. In high school, Amy gained recognition in jewelry making classes. Her works were always sophisticated and expressed deep emotions. Her pieces featuring keys and locks left strong impressions on viewers. Your work has soul, said her art teacher, Jennifer Brown. You're not just creating beautiful things, you're expressing yourself. Amy smiled. All my pieces have stories. At 18, Amy earned a scholarship to the jewelry design department at a local university. Her talent was recognized there as well, and she consistently attracted attention at campus exhibitions. Your designs are very original, said department chair Professor Sarah Johnson. The key series is particularly impressive. Why are you so drawn to keys? After a moment's hesitation, Amy answered, keys hold special meaning for me. They can both lock and unlock. They connect the past to the future. For her final year project in college, Amy presented a jewelry collection titled Locked Memories. It consisted of pieces featuring various key motifs. This collection is based on the concept of releasing locked memories, she explained at the presentation. We all want to lock something away and release something else. I hope my work can be a bridge between those desires. Her project received great acclaim and led to an exhibition at a local gallery. There, she caught the eye of a buyer from a high-end jewelry store, who offered her a job immediately after graduation. However, Amy had other plans. She was determined to launch her own brand. With Alan and Maria's support, she rented a small studio and started a brand called Locked Memories. "It's an adventure, but we believe in your talent," Maria encouraged her. "Forge your own path. We're always on your side," Alan added. Amy's designs gradually began to attract attention. Her key-themed necklaces and bracelets became particularly popular among young women. Her story became part of her brand story, resonating with many people. "My designs contain my own story," she said in an interview. "It's not just about suffering, but also about hope and rebirth." By 25, Amy had legally changed her name and was living as Caroline Walker. Her brand had boutiques in New York and Los Angeles and had achieved national success. Even celebrities wore her jewelry. One day, she was interviewed by a famous business magazine. The article featured her success story and graced the cover. With the headline, "Caroline Walker, Radiance Born from Locked Memories," she also spoke about her past in the article. "I was adopted at the age of 4. I don't know where my biological parents are. But Alan and Maria Walker, who raised me, are my true parents. Without their love and support, I wouldn't be who I am today." She smiled at the camera. Behind that smile lay the painful past she had overcome and the strength she had gained from it. Through her story, she was giving hope to many people. Caroline was absorbed in sketching new designs in her atelier at the back of her high-end boutique, Locked Memories. Beside her sat Lisa Chen, a young female designer who was both her assistant and apprentice. "This design is wonderful," Lisa said, peering at Caroline's sketch. "The key motif in the center is especially striking." Caroline smiled. "Thank you. This collection is my attempt to return to my roots. I believe returning to origins creates new creativity." The phone rang, and Lisa answered. "Hello, Locked Memories." After a moment of silence, she looked at Caroline. "There are customers who would like to meet with you, Caroline." Caroline frowned. Normally, clients didn't ask to see her without an appointment. "Who is it?" "Charlotte and Daniel Lopez. They say it's a personal matter." Caroline didn't recognize the names. Thinking it might be a business opportunity, she replied, "I can see them briefly." Entering the showroom, Caroline saw a middle-aged couple standing near the counter. The woman appeared to be in her late 50s, with a face that had once been beautiful but now showed anxiety and tension. The man was in his early 60s, with gray hair and a somewhat tired expression. They didn't seem poor, but they looked out of place in the high-end boutique, certainly not regular customers. "You're Caroline Walker," the woman said in a trembling voice. Her eyes glistened with tears. "I'm Charlotte Lopez. I'm your mother." Caroline felt the blood drain from her face. The world seemed to stop for a moment. She had imagined this moment before, but when it actually arrived, she wasn't prepared. "What kind of joke is this?" she said coldly. Charlotte stepped forward. "It's not a joke. You are really my daughter, Amy Johnson. We found you through that magazine article. Your photograph, your features, you look just like us." Daniel joined in. "We've been looking for you all this time. It took years to find you." Caroline couldn't move from the spot. She felt other customers in the store watching with curiosity. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "Please come this way," she guided them to a private room in the back. After closing the door, she turned to face them. "Why have you appeared now, after all this time?" Charlotte began explaining through tears. "We've been looking for you all along. That day, we had no choice but to leave you. Daniel and I were struggling financially, we intended to place you somewhere temporarily." Caroline tried to maintain her composure, but anger and confusion swirled inside her. "Temporarily? By locking me in a locker?" Charlotte faltered momentarily but quickly continued. I was young and foolish. Daniel and I were really struggling. We tried to take you to a shelter, but the procedures were complicated. Daniel interrupted. We came back. It took us years to find you. Caroline found no credibility in their words. Biological parents suddenly appearing after more than 30 years. And their story lacked consistency and authenticity. Charlotte reached out. Look, your photo. I've always carried this with me. She presented a faded photograph of Caroline as a baby. It was indeed a picture of young Amy. We loved you. We still love you, Charlotte continued. After you were gone, our lives fell apart. Daniel and I suffered for years. Looking at the photo, Caroline was overwhelmed by complex emotions. It was indeed her. But what did that mean? Had they truly regretted their actions and searched for her? Why appear now? She asked calmly. Why didn't you search for me when I was a child? Charlotte and Daniel exchanged glances. Daniel answered, we did search for you. But you had been adopted, and it was difficult to access records. Also, we had problems. What kind of problems? Caroline inquired. Charlotte carefully chose her words. Actually, we've been having some financial issues. At those words, Caroline felt something growing cold within her. She looked into their eyes, trying to read their hidden intentions. I see. So you're after your successful daughter's money, Caroline stated coldly. Charlotte blushed. That's not true. We just wanted to meet you. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to change the subject. We're proud of your success. We're truly lucky to have such a talented daughter. Caroline smirked. After abandoning me for over 30 years, you now claim to be proud? A heavy silence enveloped the room. Caroline stood by the window, gazing at the street outside. Various emotions were conflicting in her heart: anger, sadness, confusion, and strangely, a little curiosity. Please tell me more, Caroline suddenly said. Tell me more about yourselves. If you're truly my parents, there are things I want to know in more detail. Hope colored Charlotte's face. Of course. I'll answer anything. Then come to my house tomorrow afternoon. Caroline took out a business card and wrote her address on the back. 2:00. I have things to consider until then. Charlotte preciously accepted the card. Thank you, Amy. I mean, Caroline. I have a request, Caroline said with a stern expression. Please don't call me Amy. I am Caroline Walker. That's my name. After they left, Caroline instructed Lisa to cancel the rest of her appointments for the day. She returned to her atelier alone and stood by the window, looking up at the sky. Her mind was in turmoil. That night, Caroline called her adoptive parents. Alan and Maria were surprised by her words but responded calmly. You should proceed carefully, Maria said. Even if they are your real parents, their intentions are questionable. We trust your judgment, Alan added. Just don't expect too much. After hanging up, Caroline pulled out an old album. Photos of when she first came to the Walker family, and photos from a few years later. She was smiling happily. Alan and Maria had taught her the true meaning of family. Finally, she took out an old photograph from a special drawer. It was the photo taken when Thomas Green rescued her from the coin locker. She hadn't looked at this photo for a long time. It was a symbol of her past and the source of her art. And there was a detail in the photo she hadn't noticed before. Two people in the background, Charlotte and Daniel. They had turned back before leaving, and the camera had coincidentally captured that moment. The next afternoon, Caroline was looking out the living room window. Her home was in a quiet suburb, with large windows facing a spacious garden where spring sunlight streamed in. She checked the clock repeatedly. 10 minutes until 2:00. The doorbell rang, and Caroline took a deep breath. She reminded herself to stay calm and not be swayed by emotions. Opening the door, there stood Charlotte and Daniel. They were dressed more formally than the previous day, clearly trying to make a good impression. "Thank you for inviting us," Charlotte said with a smile. She was holding a small box. "This is a small present for you." Caroline accepted it and led them to the living room. "Please, have a seat. Would you like something to drink?" "Water is fine," Daniel replied. He looked around the room, taking in the sophisticated interior that testified to Caroline's success. When Caroline returned from the kitchen with water, Charlotte urged her to open the box. "Open it." Inside was an old small silver key pendant. "This was given to you by my mother when you were a baby," Charlotte explained. "When you disappeared, I kept this as a memento." Caroline took the pendant and held it up to the light. It was indeed old, with delicate craftsmanship that suggested it was handmade. "Tell me more about yourselves," Caroline said calmly. "What have you been doing since that day? How have you supported yourselves?" Charlotte began a detailed story. According to her, they were young and poor, unable to afford raising Amy. Charlotte, a recently divorced single mother, had met Daniel and was trying to start a new life when they faced financial difficulties. "We intended to place you in a shelter. But the procedures were complicated," Charlotte explained haltingly. "That day, we were looking for a place to temporarily leave you as a last resort." Daniel occasionally nodded, adding, "We were foolish. A mistake of youth. Afterward, we searched for you many times." Charlotte continued, "After you disappeared, we deeply regretted our actions. We consulted the police, but you had already been adopted, and the records were sealed." Her story sounded plausible and emotional. However, Caroline sensed contradictions in it. "How did you make a living afterward?" Caroline asked. "Daniel worked in construction. I did clerical work," Charlotte answered. "We were never wealthy, but we managed somehow." Daniel cleared his throat. "Things have been more difficult recently. With my health issues." Caroline stood up and said, "Please wait a moment," before leaving the room. She went to her study and took an envelope from her safe. Inside were old photographs she had carefully preserved. When she returned to the living room, Charlotte and Daniel were whispering about something. They immediately fell silent when she entered. "Look at this," Caroline said quietly, handing them the photo. It was a photo of Amy being rescued from the coin locker at the station. Thomas Green was in the center, holding young Amy. And in the background of the photo, Charlotte and Daniel were clearly visible with their arms crossed, smiling. They had turned back while leaving, and the camera had captured that moment. The blood drained from Charlotte and Daniel's faces when they saw the photo. This is..." Charlotte stammered. Her hands began to shake. "It's fake," Daniel exclaimed. "This photo must be doctored." Caroline calmly said, "This photo was taken by photographer Robert Hudson, who was present when I was discovered. It's in police records as well." She looked directly into their eyes. "You abandoned me. And now you just want my money." The two began trembling violently. Daniel stood up, trying to make excuses. "Listen, we did make mistakes." But what?" Caroline asked coldly. Charlotte began crying. "We were young and foolish then. I truly loved you. But I was in the way," Caroline finished. "You wanted to start a new life. And now, just because I've become successful, you suddenly appear and say you loved me." Daniel straightened his posture. "Yes, we have financial problems. But that's separate from finding you." "Is it really?" Caroline smiled. She took out another envelope. "I've investigated you. 3 bankruptcy filings in the past 5 years. And recently, you've been under investigation for suspected fraud." She spread those documents on the table. After learning of my success, you thought you'd found a new source of funds. Charlotte and Daniel could say nothing more. Please leave, Caroline said quietly. Her voice conveyed sadness and disappointment rather than anger. Charlotte pleaded tearfully, please, give us a chance. We've changed. She desperately reached out. You are my daughter. We may be blood related, but you are not my parents, Caroline remained firm. My parents are Alan and Maria Walker. They loved me, raised me, and supported me. That's what parents do. Daniel silently stood up. His face showed defeat. Let's go, Charlotte. But, Daniel. Charlotte resisted, but Daniel grabbed her arm. Enough. She's right. We don't deserve her. Charlotte looked at Caroline one last time. Her eyes showed genuine regret, but it was too late. The 30-year gap couldn't be bridged. Caroline, Charlotte said softly. I'm glad that you're happy. After they left, Caroline stood by the window, watching them get into their car. She felt as if something inside her had been released. At last, she had answers to questions she had carried for years. That night, Caroline called her adoptive parents. Mom, Dad, I want to tell you something, she began tearfully. Today, I confronted my past. And I realized again that you are my true family. Maria's voice trembled on the other end of the phone. You are our daughter, Caroline. That doesn't change, even without blood ties. You are our pride, Alan added. Seeing you forge your own path and live strongly is the greatest joy for us as parents. A few days later, Caroline received a call from her lawyer. Charlotte and Daniel had visited a local newspaper, trying to sell a story about Caroline. She is our daughter. Behind her success. They had claimed. But that plan also failed. Warned of defamation by Caroline's lawyer, the newspaper refused to publish the article. Their last hope was dashed. Through this experience, Caroline awakened to her mission. She decided to establish a foundation called Keys to the Future. It was an organization supporting children growing up in foster care or with adoptive parents. Months later, the opening ceremony for the foundation was held. Many supporters and people who had influenced Caroline's life gathered. Alan and Maria sat in the front row. Caroline stood on the stage and began an emotional speech. Family is not about blood ties. It's shaped by love and choice. I was abandoned at the age of 4, but that was the beginning of new doors opening for me. Blessed with wonderful parents in Alan and Maria Walker, I was loved and nurtured. She faltered momentarily but continued strongly, now it's my turn to open doors for children. Through this foundation, I want to provide hope and opportunity to children in difficult circumstances. The venue erupted in applause. Caroline's speech was also being broadcast on television. In an apartment in a distant town, Charlotte and Daniel were watching the television screen. Tears of regret glistened in Charlotte's eyes. What have we done? She whispered. Daniel silently stood up and left the room. Their relationship was also falling apart. The two who had lost sight of true value had no future. Meanwhile, Caroline was beginning a new chapter. Through the foundation's activities, she would bring light to the lives of many children. Her past wounds had transformed into the power to help others. And she knew. True family is not bound by blood ties, but by love and dedication. Her life was proof of that. A child who was abandoned, saved by love, and now standing on the side of saving others. That was the story of Caroline Walker.